Hello, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm damenshi, and I shall be your host for today, whether you want me to or not. I first of all want to point out that this will be the first of a new format style that I'll be attempting for the Let's Develop series, one that I hope will make things a good deal smoother, and hopefully easier to manage. Without any further ado, let's get started. Now, the first thing you may notice is that I did make some changes to the intro. It was brought up to me by one of my associates that the entire setup with the incident 15 years ago and the training camp segment were not necessarily important, nor were they necessarily relevant to the plot. I had this entire delusion that I was going to try and link up the incident 15 years ago with something that would occur later in the story, but that didn't really come to fruition, and so in the end I decided to scrap it completely and move on to a different take on the intro of the story. But with that in mind, I'll go ahead and shut up and let the opening scene play out. And here we go. So, the first thing I want to bring up as far as the map itself is concerned is that the original version was actually much too big. For those of whom follow the actual Tempus site, you'll know what I'm talking about. The map was at, I would say, roughly not double this size, but significantly larger. The main problem with it was the fact that it took me a good 40 seconds to a minute, at least, to walk across the map entirely. And I figured the town itself, the town of Salos, does not need to be anywhere near that big, so I ended up shrinking it down a good bit. The roads look a little strange, I suppose. No, on second thought they look fine. It's not really an issue, I suppose. Everything's much more condensed, though, in this version, which should make traversing it much easier. What you'll probably notice that I do here is I go out of my way to talk to more or less every NPC in the town itself. I believe all but 2 of them have pretty substantial dialogue, so I wanted to go ahead and show that off for what it was worth. For those of whom don't care, this entire segment is more or less pointless, but I don't know, I thought the flavor text in of itself was interesting enough to warrant showing it off for what it was worth. Maybe that's just me. What I should point out is I am not actually completely responsible for all of the NPC dialogue. That credit actually goes to my associate Terry Wood, the same one who brought up the issue with the original version of the opening. He took it upon himself to write out a good bit of the non-important NPC dialogue, and I'm quite grateful for that. If you pay attention, I'd imagine you actually could figure out which ones he wrote and which ones I wrote. He has this kind of take where he likes to make things rather eccentric, shall I say. A lot of his NPCs are very strange, but in a way that makes them memorable, so I honestly don't mind it. Something else I think I should bring up is a common problem I have with developing, especially the beginnings of these things, is the fact that there's a lot of information that I personally know and that others don't. So, like, I could be establishing a bunch of information without anyone really knowing what it means, because I know what it is, and I know what everything is, but not everybody does. And personally, I kind of feel like that's a problem to an extent. Like, I think I established everything more or less clearly, mainly that Isaac and company have returned after a 5-year-long training period, and that's basically the gist of what you need to understand for this, and I hope that, on top of the fact that Isaac is in fact a prince, he is in fact the most recent member of the Lumen family, which their legendary status doesn't necessarily need to be established right away. I kind of feel like that will come up in context, but it is something that needs to be understood, and the fact that their sword, the Ivory Soul, is akin to, like, the Vampire Killer or the Master Sword in the sense that it's a legendary weapon that's been used for generations. So that much needs to be established, more or less, and I'm hoping that came across clearly. If anybody wants to kind of throw their 2 cents in on how effective I was at that, go ahead, because I could kind of use the pointers and the comments, because, like I said, it's all known to me. You guys don't know that, but I do. So it'd be nice to know just how clear I made all those points. A lot of these buildings are not actually enterable at this time, for those of whom have noticed. Essentially, no door means there's no entrance to the thing. That's mainly from the fact that by the time I made this, I didn't really feel like it was necessary to make all the buildings enterable just yet, for the sake of moving the plot along. I mean, I had some extras established already, but there wasn't enough reason for me to warrant making interiors of all the buildings at this point in time. I mean, the church right there, it's, there's no door. The only 2 buildings in this town that are actually enterable at this point in time are the item shop and equipment shop, but that's mainly because those are straightforward enough that I could make those without any real problem. Oh, here's something else. I wanted to make a nod to Aqueous to those who know who he is. If you don't know who he is, you'll figure it out. I promise, you'll figure it out. Or not. I mean, I don't know. If you don't figure it out, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal yet, so no worries. No worries. Actually, I love making those kind of plot-related nods. It kind of makes me feel clever, I guess, in the sense that I know things that you don't, and I can make nods to stuff that'll happen later because I'm clever. God, though, the amount of times that kind of thing has created a corner for myself. I've written myself into a corner actually a handful of times with this plot already, and many times I've had to make up something or have somebody else give me some kind of idea, and then I can kind of write my way around that wall and then make myself seem all clever, like I intended to do it from the very beginning. When in reality, I'm honestly I just don't pay attention to every single detail I put together. I mean, something that not everybody seems to realize, I guess, is that I'm lazy. But I don't know. I still put substantial effort into putting this stuff together. I'm a huge stickler for characters, in the sense that I like to have them developed and fleshed out and have personalities. I mean, that's the reason these NPCs even have this kind of flavor text. Otherwise, I'd just be writing, like, super generic dialogue. But I figured that was boring and lazy, and something I couldn't really forgive myself if I did. I mean, it's much more interesting this way, I think. They're all so quirky and arguably creepy. I like how Isaac is genuinely just kind of like, okay, this is a thing. Yeah, a handful of the nights, like virtually every night in Castle Lumen I wrote the dialogue for, though. Every character in Castle Lumen I wrote the dialogue for, I should say. We're coming up on our first, as I call it, refreshing pause. So, just a second. And I will be right back. Okay, so here we have a extra addition I threw in, mainly just for myself, because I enjoy these things, like I've said before. This is the Lumen family burial site. This is where I've decided to establish all of the previous Lumen that came before the main character, Isaac. And I wrote short blurbs on all their major exploits, because I figured that's something that'd be done, right? Yes? You know, probably isn't that hard to figure out, but my method for making all of these statues is essentially making the character sprite and then grayscaling them. So, I don't know. I thought it was a cool trick at the time, and it does get the job done. I can make some pretty nice custom statues this way. Edward, your plot needs to be fleshed out significantly. It all ties into a character in this story, and that character was developed by a friend of mine. And, I don't know, I'd considered scrapping him since a while ago, but he became kind of integrated and kind of necessary, and I can't really disregard him at this point. But his backstory needs some serious fleshing out. That's for a later time, though. I don't need to worry about that right now. It's not a problem at this point in time. It's just poor Edward. His backstory just feels so incomplete. So does Adele's. Everybody else feels so nice and clean and thought out, and those two just don't. I don't know. The idea behind Adele was the fact that I wanted to establish her in an era of peace, to kind of create a different kind of atmosphere. Not that everything's dire all the time, you know. But that in of itself kind of promotes a challenge of creating a story in an era where not a lot is going on. I figure it'll be an interesting challenge when I get to it, but that's for later. Yeah, I'm going out of my way to show off every single, most of the conversations you can have with all the NPCs around here. Like I said, I wanted to show it off. I put a lot of effort into this stuff after all. This guy right here, this is a scholar. I plan to have these positioned in regular places all over the place. Basically, they're going to be like this guy here, giving you blurbs of information regarding side quests or special items and etc. you can find in the world. This one is referring to a special situation I have in mind, let's say. I don't want to talk about it too much yet, because I still need to finalize the details with the other guy I'm working with for it. But just know that it is something that I plan to do in the future. Those of whom know his project would probably get what I'm hinting at based on the relic that's used in the entire event. So that's a thing. For those of whom actually watched the previous ones, and for those that the previous videos, I mean, and that played the demo, I've made mention of this before, but I actually completely rebuilt these maps. Like, this is a brand new tile set I've been working with. I really should stick this up on the credits page. Actually, I need to give this tile sets creator credit. That is something I should do. But yeah, I went and rebuilt all these maps basically from scratch. Especially since I had to go back and shrink a lot of them down for the sake of condensing them a bit better. Castle Lumen here has actually been shrunk down a decent bit since its older incarnation. All of it, again, for the sake of streamlining everything, making everything a bit more compact. And here we have yet another one of my personal additions, the ability to change the color of Isaac's coat. Yeah, it doesn't really have a whole lot of, like, functional purpose, but I personally enjoy these things quite a bit. And I figured it didn't do any harm sitting here, so in it stays. In it stays. The adventurer in green. There's something nostalgic about that. Yes, that is a nod. I feel like I don't even really need to explain it. I didn't use any names, so... But even then, I feel like it's still quite obvious what I'm doing with that. But, I felt like it'd be nice to have a character that genuinely doesn't like their position. I mean, he's better than that, right? He can make the potions and the herbs and stuff. Why is he sitting in the darn storage room? Because Marie has a sense of humor, I guess. Honestly, though, like from a work standpoint, not the best decision. Do I care? No, not really. This event right here, coming up in a second, is like a personal favorite of mine, as well as the one who suggested it. I won't give away the name at this point, but... That right there was yet another nod. That one's a little more vague, though. I'm not sure everybody will understand what I'm doing there, but it doesn't matter. In fact, all the nods I make are pretty much vague enough that it doesn't matter if you don't understand them, but if you do, it's kind of like a pleasant surprise. This throne room, this took some working. Mainly because it's just a long hallway, and I wasn't really sure how to decorate it properly. I think I settled on something okay, though. I think it looks okay. I actually rather like this whole exchange between Isaac and his mom. I mean, I find Marie kind of entertaining because she's this sort of benevolent ruler, but at the same time, so, like, youthful in a sense. I mean, full disclosure, I kind of got inspiration from Palutena from Kid Icarus Uprising for this character's personality, but I just figured it worked so nicely to kind of create this ceremony type deal where Isaac receives the Ivory Soul. But then she goes into this whole spiel of like, oh, would you rather have a badge instead? And I think like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And then goes into the whole, sword's not at full power at the moment. Is there a way to restore it? Well, yes. But I'm afraid I can't tell you what it is. Why not? Tradition, mostly. It's all part of the path to realize your full potential. Plus, if I had to go through this, you should have to do the same. Oh, good luck. I don't know. It's something I find humorous about that. I find generally my characters in pain is funny. Unfortunately, Isaac is the only one capable of having this pain thrown at him at this time, so he's going to suffer quite a bit. He's essentially become a mental punching bag at this point. But I mean, it's all in quirky fun, I suppose, so it's not like he's going to end up depressed or anything by the end of this. But everybody around him is going to generally kind of beat down the fact that he's trying to take things seriously to an extent, or point out his own 2 cents, but then things kind of end up working against him through some method or another, just because that's how the world is for him. I also switched my coat to white because I kind of got sick of the green color. I think white works. I mean, could you imagine how freaking awesome that would look? That white coat. Jeez. That white coat, you know? I like it. And with Isaac finally gaining possession of the Ivory Soul, we finally move on to the point where the plot kicks off a good bit. Finally get things rolling. And it all begins with this exchange. I actually don't completely love this exchange. I mean, it feels a bit forced, I guess, a bit sudden. I mean, it could definitely be worse, but I feel like pacing is something that needs to be tweaked a bit. That's my opinion anyway. I'm not completely sure. It's settled enough for what it is. It's not bad or anything. It's just something I might address later. It's a bridge I shall cross when I come to it. This thing is still quite early, so we'll see where it goes.